Some of the fastest, most underrated beasts of the past got lost in the shadows of their more famous siblings. From overlooked powerhouses to sleeper hits, these are the 10 forgotten muscle cars. Starting at number 10, we have the 1963 Dodge 440. This muscle car didn't get the attention it deserved, and it's a bit of a mystery why. People often wondered, was it a Dart? Was it a Polara? Or something else altogether? But the truth is, it was kind of all those things. In 1962, the top version of the Dodge Dart was called the 440. But in 1963, the Dart got smaller and became a compact, and what was left behind became the new mid-size offering from Dodge, simply known as the 440 for 1963 and 1964. Later on, it became the Polara. Now, while it did offer a 440 cubic inch engine option, the name 440 wasn't linked to the engine size. This car could come with anything from a 318 to an impressive 426 max wedge under the hood. With the 426 max wedge, the Dodge 440 was one of the quickest muscle cars on the road back in the day. Studebaker isn't exactly the first name that comes to mind when talking about American muscle cars, but they had their moments in the late 1950s and 60s. One of the more overlooked performers from that era was the Studebaker Lark. But its plain, boxy design didn't do it any favors. It looked pretty basic, giving no clue what it was capable of. Under the hood, the Lark packed a 289 engine, which some mistakenly thought was Ford's 289 V8. But this design, inspired by Cadillac's 1949 engine, featured wedge head combustion chambers, large overhead valves, and hydraulic lifters, making it surprisingly advanced for its time. The Lark came in 3 power levels, R1, R2, and R3, 2 of which had a Paxton supercharger. The 1964 Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt. Back in the 1960s, factory drag cars were the thing, and Ford didn't want to miss out, so they took the powerful 427 engine from the Big Galaxy and dropped it into the much lighter Fairlane. What made the Thunderbolt so tough was a little trick from back in the day: underrating engine power. While Ford listed the 427 engine at 425 horsepower, it was more likely putting out around 600 horsepower. According to Hemmings, only 100 Thunderbolts were ever made, and just 49 of those had 4-speed transmissions, making it a super rare muscle car. When you think of muscle cars, Mercury probably isn't the first name that pops up, but they definitely made some cool ones. Even though cars like the Cougar are well known, they were often overshadowed by the Ford Mustang and Torino. But in 1964, the Mercury Comet Cyclone GT was actually the fastest car in the entire Ford Lincoln Mercury lineup. The Cyclone GT was built on the same platform as a Ford Fairlane, but it was lighter and quicker. In 1964, Mercury dropped a few 427 engines in about 50 cars, and while the Fairlane Thunderbolt was racing in the Superstock class, the Comet Cyclones took on the factory experimental class, which was a no-holds-barred wild race division. Wild Bill Shrewberry, known for the Hemi Underglass and the Batmobile, raced a 1964 Comet Cyclone and absolutely dominated the FX class that year. While the GTO was grabbing all the attention, Pontiac quietly rolled out another amazing muscle car in the mid-60s with the 2+2. Sure, the GTO might sound cooler, unlike something out of a math class, but the 2+2 actually packed more punch. The GTO's 325 horsepower 389 engine was no match for the 376 horsepower 421 engine in the 1965 2+2. Pontiac even called the 2+2 the GTO's big brother. Some sources claim the 2+2 could go from 0 to 60 in just 3.9 seconds, but that was a heavily modified version. The 2+2 started out as a trim option for the Catalina in 1964, but by 1965 it became its own model before going back to being a trim model in 1967, only to be discontinued shortly after. Despite its sleek looks and solid performance, the 2+2 didn't sell well. According to Haggerty, fewer than 28,000 units were sold over 4 years, making it a rare sight even at Pontiac car events. The 1966 Plymouth Belvedere Satellite is another underrated Mopar that doesn't get the love it deserves, mostly because its history is a bit tricky. Everyone remembers the GTX and the Roadrunner, but what most people forget is that both of those muscle cars actually started as Belvederes. In 1965, when the Plymouth Fury became the brand's top full-size model, the Belvedere got shifted down to the mid-size category. The Satellite was the top trim for the Belvedere in 1966. It got the option of the 426 Street Hemi. The car was so impressive that Richard Petty won the 1966 Daytona 500 with it. Then, in 1967, Petty went on to a spree, grabbing 18 poles, 27 wins, and 40 top 10 finishes, eventually taking the NASCAR Cup Series championship. Not many cars have that kind of racing pedigree, so it's strange how the Belvedere Satellite has faded into the background over time. If you've been enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and smash that bell notification. The 1966 Chevrolet Corvair Yenko Stinger. The name Stinger might sound a bit odd to some, but it's worth noting that the Porsche 911 wasn't the first rear-engine sports car to use an air-cooled flat-six engine. While there's a debate about whether the Corvair fits into the muscle car category, it was quick and affordable even without a massive V8 engine. The rear-mounted engine, combined with the rear swing axle, gave the Corvair some tricky handling, arguably worse than the early Porsche 911s. It even caught the attention of Ralph Nader, who criticized it in his 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed. However, his claims were later debunked in 1972. Despite the bad press, the second-generation Corvair still sold pretty well, and even Jay Leno owns a Corvair Corsa. But the Corvair really hit its stride when Chevy partner Don Yenko got his hands on 100 of them. These Yenko Stingers came with modified engines, pushing up to 240 horsepower. They also got a heavy-duty suspension, a 4-speed manual transmission, and a quick steering rack and limited slip differentials as part of the package. Back in the 1960s, AMC was the fourth player in the U.S. muscle car scene alongside Ford, Chrysler, and GM. While the company went out of business in 1988, they made some pretty cool cars before that. One of their standout models was the 1968 AMC Javelin, which was their take on the Camaro, Mustang, and Challenger. The Javelin had a weight advantage, tipping the scales at 2,836 pounds for the road version. The most popular model was the AMC Javelin Trans Am, a special version made to meet homologation rules with only 100 cars produced. Each one sported a unique red, white, and blue tricolor paint scheme. The Javelin also offered a Go package, which swapped out the base 290 cubic inch V8 for a 390 engine. Interestingly, the 390 wasn't available on the race cars because of a restriction limiting engines to 305 cubic inches. The 1968 AMC AMX was basically a shortened version of the Javelin, trimmed down by 12 inches. That change made it a strict two-seater, unlike the Javelin's 2+2 setup. Think of it like the short wheelbase Audi Quattro compared to the regular one, or the Mustang Boss 302 versus the standard Mustang. AMX stood for American Motors Experimental, and the car lived up to that name. It was as stripped down as a street-legal car could get with minimal options. The same 290 and 390 V8 engines from the Javelin carried over along with the same transmission choices. With a shorter chassis and less weight, the AMX was incredibly quick, even keeping up with Corvettes. And when equipped with a 4.44 rear gears, it could hit 60 miles an hour in just over 4 seconds, making it one of the fastest muscle cars off the line at the time. The Chevrolet Chevelle was a beast, but its larger, more refined sibling, the Monte Carlo, deserves some respect too. Built on the G platform, which was essentially a stretched version of the A body, the Monte Carlo had a range of engine options. These started with a 350 cubic inch small block and went all the way up to the SS 454 big block, the same powerhouse found in the Chevelle. The Monte Carlo's popularity got a boost when it appeared as the main character's first car in the Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, where it perfectly captured the essence of a sleeper car, unassuming but packing serious performance.